Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Investor. I'm Susie.
And I'm Michael, and we're excited you joined us for this adventure.
So today's guest is Rob Overstreet. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Big fan of the show and excited to be here and bring some value to the listeners.
And we're excited too. And just to let our Adventures family know, so Rob and I initially met from Raise Masters, so Hunter Thompson's Raise Masters, and like even right away, right? Like the questions Rob was answering, like when he had so much value, like right away, I was like, I like him. And then when Daisy and Luke even were like, you need to have this guy on your podcast, I was like, I enjoy this times two. Like this is going to be awesome. So again, thank you so much. We're excited.
The feeling's mutual, Susie. And yeah, we met in Raise Masters and just watched you and your team bringing the heat inside of the group and bringing lots of value to our members. And on top of everything else, I have a place to crash if I ever come to Europe. So
Totally.
yeah.
Absolutely. And we got to meet Rob in person as well a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, best ever. That's right. Yeah. So
we know a lot about you, Rob, but people listening don't. Would you mind sharing with our listeners, our adventurers family, a little bit more about your background and like why you started investing in real estate?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I've been investing as an active real estate investor for the past 7 or 8 years. And before that, I was involved in a few different industries. It all started in my college years. And by the way, I'm in San Diego and I've been here for 20 years, but graduated from San Diego State. I studied economics there. At that time, I was working in the hospitality business, a company called Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Oh.
And so I worked there for a bunch of years. It was a great lifestyle. You work at night and I've done pretty much every job in the house. At some point during my tenure with the company, they actually took the company public, and so there were definitely opportunities to grow within that company, that space, hospitality. But at the end of the day, I was still trading time for money.
Yeah.
And I put on my future binoculars, and I wasn't married or kids at the time, which I have both of those now. And it wasn't just time for money. It was like the most valuable time for money. I mean, when you work in hospitality, you're working nights, you're working weekends, holidays. I mean, I missed a lot of events with my family and et cetera. And plus I always had an entrepreneurial, itch in my stomach. Right. And so somewhere along the lines, I started looking at different business opportunities and stumbled across a franchise show here in San Diego. They host these events once or twice a year. They get all the franchises together and prospects can go interview different franchises, et cetera. And so I went there not looking for anything in particular, just always wanting to network with folks in business. And networking is, as you guys are aware, a big part of the business we're in today, but it's just always been, kind of a fun activity for me. I like to talk to people. I mean, if you ask my wife, especially when I start rambling about real estate, you're like an airbag. So just going to look at what opportunities were available. I met some folks from a company called Minuteman Pro, which is a franchise focused on B2B services, marketing services, promotional products, the pens that you see at these trade shows, all the backdrop banners and printing and graphic design, all B2B. And I started doing my due diligence and eventually purchased a franchise, an existing location of a Minuteman Press. And so I operated that business for, 7 or 8 years. But during that time, I realized that I was still trading my time for money.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a fantastic business. I learned so much. It's very brick and mortar. We had a location. I had a full staff. I had equipment and cost of goods and all of that stuff. But if I wasn't there, the business didn't grow. And so I started looking into other investing ideas and different business options and things, and started educating myself on investing in real estate. And I was looking towards some of the world's most wealthy people, and almost all of them have a significant stake in real estate holdings in their own portfolios. And so I said, this is something I need to learn. So started educating myself, started listening to podcasts like yours and others. Of course, not at that time, but other podcasts. I'm a student for the rest of my life. I'm always learning, reading, going to events, so always trying to get an edge in whatever field I'm in. And so started seeking mentors and aligned ourselves with some of our first mentors. We started looking at deals together, started underwriting deals together, putting offers on deals together until we eventually syndicated our first deal. That was in Dallas, Texas, about 7 years ago. And at that time, I was still operating my franchise business. Once we did that first deal, I was bit by the bug, right? And
Yeah.
so I started devoting more time to it and looking at more deals, submitting more offers. And then probably 6 months later, we did our second deal. It was a 132 unit apartment in Cincinnati, Ohio. 6 months later, we did a 120 unit apartment in Indianapolis. And so, I mean, my time commitment to my growing real estate company and my franchise business were kind of tugging at opposite ends of each other. So about 4 or 5 years ago, with my wife, I decided that I would sell the franchise and focus exclusively on the real estate. So I've been full time for the last 5 years.
Which is so exciting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
some people might listen to this though and be like, wow, that's a lot of apartments. So is he still trading his time for money? Like, how does that all work? So what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, being on the active side, and I know you guys know this, it's a very full-time effort. But I'm okay with that because we're building equity, right? In all these deals. Despite how much equity it is, if it's this percent or more percent or less percent or whatever, it's collecting acorns for the future. And that's my goal, is acquire high quality, investment quality real estate, and as much of it as possible. And along with that, educate our investors about all the benefits of investing in real estate as an asset type, and helping our investors build their wealth and achieve their financial goals. I forget who said it, Zig Ziglar or someone said, if you help enough people achieve their goals, you'll achieve your goals, or something along those lines. So we take that approach to what we do every day. But yeah, to your point, it's a very hands-on, very time-intensive business on the active side, but we love the work. And I don't view it as much as trading time for money. I view it more like trading my time today for my time in the future.
Yes, that was wonderful. I do too.
You can quote me on that.
Right? Yeah, that's a good one.
That'd be the quote for the
Yeah.
podcast right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Like, what gets you the most excited about real estate?
Oh boy, you guys know the drill. I mean, there's so many layers to the day to day, and operating the deals themselves, to looking for the new opportunities, to working and educating our investor community. There's multiple segments to the business. I guess the two categories that I like the most are looking at deals and evaluating their feasibility as investment opportunities or not. And I know you guys know this, but in today's world, you got to look at a lot of deals to find that kind of one that you've been looking for. And so I enjoy the pursuit of the opportunities and nurturing our broker relationships and our seller relationships. But on the other side, I also like talking with investors. I like educating investors. I like to hear about not only their goals and their financial goals for the future, but I like to learn about themselves as people. What are your hobbies? Do you have kids? The kid thing is like a big connector. Like, I'm a dad now for the last 6 years, and I always want to hear about other people's kids. Don't get my own enough fill at home with two littles at home, but I like that kind of personal connection with the people that we're in business with, be it our limited partners, our passive investors in our deals, or the brokers that we interact with when we're out there kicking the tires on new opportunities, to all of our service providers and all of our potential partners. Like, I like to get to know people outside of business, right? What makes you tick? What are you into? What do you do for fun? These sorts of things. That to me is where the gold is. I like to get to know people and see if it's a good fit. If it's a good fit for you, if it's a good fit for us. So
Yeah, that's great. I just want to ask a quick question. So you said your first three properties, you had Dallas, Cincy, and then Indianapolis. Do you still kind of buy all over, or what does that look like now, 7 years later?
yeah, really good question. Today, we focus on a couple of markets based on a few criteria. One is the economics of the market, right? And so we like to invest in areas that are growing, that have strong migration patterns, good job growth, household formation. There's a whole myriad of metrics that we look at. But alternatively, and almost as important, is we focus on markets where we built the deepest relationships. We're working on a deal right now that was brought to us completely off market. And so I can't say that we would have had those opportunities when we got started 7 years ago. That's based on many, many years of relationship building. How many kids do you have? And like hit on that deep level, right? With the brokers that are feeding us these opportunities. And I mean, something happened probably a couple years ago, where based on these relationships that we've nurtured, deals started coming to us before they saw the light of day. A broker calls you up and they say, "Hey, Rob, I know you're real active in the market." And that's just simply from being out there in the field, in the trenches, looking at deals. and establishing our credibility as buyers, et cetera.
Mhm.
And yeah, a couple of years ago, we started seeing this trend where guys would say, hey, I got a lead on this opportunity. I don't have any information. I have a financial statement and a rent roll and an address. So it's like, give us your best shot. And if we can make a deal happen, then this will never see the light of day. So that was like a real kind of turning point for us. I was like, wow, like all this work is starting to work. So anyways, but yeah, so we will look at deals in other markets for our own stuff. We try to stay in a couple locations where we have the deepest relationships.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you kind of mentioned a couple things here as far as like getting to know the broker at a deeper level and things like that, building those relationships. Do you have any other suggestions for some of our listeners out there who might be trying to build those connections in markets that they're interested in investing in?
Yeah, absolutely. For the active investors that are out there trying to be the sponsor on a new deal and go out and raise some capital, there was another turning point, and this happened many years earlier. I live in San Diego. We don't invest in California for a variety of reasons we don't need to get into, but we live here, and so we're investing out of state. And I was initially, when we were starting out, growing our business, trying to build relationships over the phone and through email, and that stuff absolutely works. Keep doing that every day. However, I saw a shift when I started making the commitment to travel. And it didn't take us long to figure this out, but it's like, hey, if you're going to buy my $15 million apartment deal, you're going to have to check the box that you or someone from your team comes out and at least does that initial tour. Do I like doing the initial tours? Yes and no. Do I have to go on an airplane for a 1-day visit to go and see apartment units, vacant apartment units that I've seen thousands of apartment units before, and take a bunch of pictures? My wife complains. She's like, you have more pictures of apartments than our kids. But it's important. It's important to check that box. It shows the seller that you're serious. And more than that, it shows the broker that you're serious. And it wasn't until we really got serious with our travel and say, listen, I got to be in the market. I got to shake their hand. I got to ask them about their kids, like all that stuff. And that's when we started seeing some real traction. We were invited to more best and final rounds. Our offers started getting awarded to us. And that's when we started to do some transactions, because yeah, just call me tomorrow and we'll submit our offer and I'll see it when we get under contract, whatever that stuff is. It's challenging to get deals that way. You have to be committed. You have to fly to the markets. Now, if you invest in your backyard, you already have an advantage there, right? Because you just hop in your car, drive to the deal, meet the broker, ask about their kids. Like, and so it's easier. But for me, investing out of state, I fly a lot. I'm willing to hop on a plane tomorrow if that's what it's going to take.
I get it. I get that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's good
So
not being able to.
that's what's impressive about you guys. I mean, you're doing it from even further distance. That's huge. That's really cool.
I think it just shows, though, like even anyone who is active or passive, like how much passion goes into this to make it work. But even in that sense, like what the long term like gain is. Like when I can retire, I don't know, in 10 years, like I'll be like, I'm so happy I got on that airplane that 20 times
Mhm.
like across the pond to make it worth
Yeah.
it. Like it's worth it. But then even from a passive point of view, like I am very happy that the active like syndicators or the leads in the deals where I passively invest are getting on that airplane and doing it as well, right? Because if they weren't, then who knows if I would ever have opportunities to those deals. And like
Mhm.
just like how it goes full circle with it
Yeah.
all. And I don't really mind the airplane anymore. So
Yeah,
it works.
it is what it is. I mean, I don't mind it either, except that my wife works full time and we have two full and a half time kids that keep us busy all the time. So it's funny,
Yeah.
like we met at BEC, and I think I might have shared this with you, but my wife is my partner in life and in my business, even though she's not active in the business, because she supports me, she supports what the goal is and everything else. And I feel very extremely blessed to be married such a wonderful woman. And but these conferences, best ever, it's in Denver. It's at this like super nice swanky place, and like the vendors are treating to dinner and stuff. And I talked to my wife, and she thinks it's a vacation. Right? I'm like, no, honey, I'm working. Well, where'd you eat tonight? It was like, well, that fancy steakhouse place at the venue at BEC, because the lender was buying, and it was just like, more steak and wine, please. I'll see you and the kids on Sunday. But
Totally.
Yeah.
Guys have your leftover
So
mac and cheese.
hopefully she doesn't listen to this. But it's important. I mean, you got to put in the work. You got to put in the flights and grind it out. But it's all worth it in the end. Like I said, it's collecting acorns, bits of equity in this deal, that deal, the next one, the next 10.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think we've made a lot of progress. Just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, Rob, is Susie's been able to make it now to Tulsa. This is our 4th trip in the last 4 months, roughly, something like that. But something crazy like that. Like she's always going back to Tulsa, but I think that's helped out quite a bit. Not only seeing our assets like on a monthly basis now, but also being able to shake hands, right, with the people that we're trying to do business with, which is really good. So
that's absolutely right. And people notice, the brokers see it, the LPs see it. It's like, these guys are serious and this is who I want to be in business with. Just, I mean, that's our motto, is just good business with good people. Right. So
I like that.
yeah,
I-
life is too short.
I do have a
Yeah.
question about your wife. So like you've been very entrepreneurial before. It was the whole like feel like I'm just swapping time for money. So you also said she's very, very supportive in this journey. Was it like that from day one when you were like, I'm going to do 2 at the same time? I know you decided to leave one, but then like, how did that conversation go? Cause I think that speaks volumes too.
Yeah, it was a big decision, and we considered all the pros and cons. And I guess the biggest decision along this journey was the decision to sell my business and go into real estate full time. At that time, my company was doing well. I'd grown sales a bunch. I had a full team, staff, et cetera, but it was still holding me back from really pushing the gas pedal on my focus on real estate. Right. And so again, we put on our future binoculars and say, take these 2 paths. You keep going this way, or take a risk and go that way.
Mhm.
And the benefits and the future, what the future held, far outweighed anything else. But it was a risk, but it was a calculated risk. So the way I exited my company was, I sold the business to one of my key employees who had the balance sheet and the finances to do the deal. And the way we financed it was a combination of some upfront capital. And then I carried paper, which was part of my exit, that's still paying me today from that business.
Wow.
So I've got another year or 2 left on the term, but it's provided me with a small monthly positive cash flow stream for the last 5 years from the sale of my company, which kind of softened the risk a little bit.
Yeah.
On top of that, my wife, she works full time, which again, she doesn't think of it this way, that she's in my business, but she's very much a key part of it, because we rely on her income until I can build my company to a level we have even more options, right? Whether she wants to continue working or not, or whatever. But yeah, so that was probably the biggest decision in terms of my marriage and mixing my relationship and business. But she was very supportive, and she continues to be supportive today. And she understands the drill. It's like, hey, I've got to run out to Houston tomorrow and I'll be back the next day or whatever. I mean, no questions asked. It's like, that's the part of the deal. But like I said, so some of the conferences do have a fun component to it. Like, and it's reconnecting with you guys and other potential partners, because that's a big part of it as well. And I know you guys know this, but it's like, these networking events and these real estate conferences, I'm not only looking to build relationships with limited partners, I'm looking to build relationships with active partners, people that I like and trust, and we can work together. We see eye to eye on macro level of what's going on in the market, how we underwrite deals, all these things. It's like, hey, this could be a good fit. Like, let's look at a deal together and see if it makes sense. So all that stuff is critically important. I've never done a deal without partners. We've always had co-GP, this, that you always need a KP or whatever it takes, right, to get a deal done. And I don't know any group that does it any other different either. No matter what their size is. The largest, biggest, baddest syndicator out there with 20 zillion doors, they're still doing partnerships with co-GPs and whatnot, even though they could quite easily take a deal out on their own. So it's not just limited partner or passive investor relationships and broker relationships. It's also those active investor relationships too, that we really value, we nurture. So
Yeah, it's definitely the who, not how,
Yeah.
right? That's
Who, not
funny.
how.
Yeah, biggest part of teams.
Yeah. That's right.
Just one final question about your wife being on board with everything. Like, did you guys sit down and like have a discussion, like a line, like you were explaining to her, like, hey, this is what's going to get us to where we want to be in the future? Like you were talking about your future binoculars earlier. Like, would you guys look at those together and be like, this is where we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years. And this is really what's going to get us there, right? Is that how it kind of worked out? And then that's why she sees, okay, your vision and her vision are meshed together, trying to achieve a common goal. And she knows that what you're doing right now is helping achieve that.
Yeah, it was a combination of all of that, Michael, as well as I guess what made it a little bit easier of a sell was the fact that we had already syndicated 3 or 4 deals and had a couple hundred units under the belt. And so she had already seen some of the results of what could happen if I just focused exclusively all of my energy on this business. So
Gotcha.
it probably would have been a much different conversation if I just come home from work one day and say, now we're going to real estate.
Right.
With no experience or no deals under the belt. So the fact that I was able to syndicate a couple projects already, and we were at that time seeing some of the fruits from that labor. And then, of course, busting out the abacus and looking at what the equity could grow to upon disposition, et cetera. It all made sense, but it was a very in-depth, multi-week, are we making the right decision kind of a thing. But looking back now, I know it was the right decision, and she feels the same way. And it's my partnership in life, but also in business, whether she views it or not. It's like, you're a part of my business. I know you couldn't rattle off what a cap rate is or anything like that, but she's integral in the whole big picture.
Absolutely. I do too.
I know a lot of our listeners out there probably have a struggle like getting their spouse on board with what investing in real estate or whatever kind of entrepreneurial thing that they're doing. Do you have any advice for those people out there? You know, how to get your other significant other, your spouse, like really excited about what you're doing specifically?
Lots of flowers and chocolates. I'm just kidding. No.
I
I
like
mean,
that.
just being honest and just having the conversation and really understanding the risk. And everybody's situation is completely different, right? Mine was unique to me and my wife and my family. Some of your listeners might be in better or worse situations. You just really need to understand how the business works, how active syndicators and investors get compensated, and making sure you're planning for that. Because I've seen this before where people get all, excited about the real estate business. They go quit their job tomorrow, and you can really put yourself in a pinch if you haven't really thought it through. Because especially in today's phase of the real estate cycle, GPs don't get paid for a while. There's a little bit of comp up front, but I mean, other than that, all the cash flow from these deals these days are all going into the passive investors' pockets, as it should be, because they're the ones putting up the money to do the deal. So,
Mhm.
um, I don't know, just advice on that, just making sure that you communicate often if this is something you are considering, leaving your W-2 to go full bore into real estate, and just understanding how the bills at home are going to get paid, and put some timelines on it, and just really understand each other. And again, my situation was different. I was fortunate. My wife earns a really good salary, and we had the ability, with between her income and me carrying some paper on the business, that bought us several 6, 7 years of comfortable income that allow me to go out and do more deals, and build my business and build our income on this side of it. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
I do too. That's great advice
mhm.
because even like just because finances are difficult to talk about anyways. So being able to even have that kind of conversation does wonders. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob, it's been a pleasure chatting with you so far. Before we end the show, we have this segment about the Adventurous Forward. These are 4 exploratory questions we ask all of our guests. The first question we have for you, Rob, is where is one place you wish to travel to and why?
Well, I think I shared with you earlier, but I should say before we started recording, I'm a big swimmer and just generally into water sports. And for many, many years, and even to this day, I'm a surfer. So I surf as often as I can. These days, between business and family, it's more like once or twice a week, maybe. But there was a period in my 20s and my early 30s when I was surfing like 7 days a week. And I
That's
traveled for
That is cool.
surfing. I'd go on these adventures, and it's a hobby, a passion of mine. And so, one place that I'd love to go that I've never been is the South Pacific, Indonesia. There's some really really good surfing waves. I mean, like world class kind of stuff. And I've never had really the time or the resources to do that. So that's one of those places that I'll get there someday. I'm going to build my business, and then I'm going to go spend a month out in Indo and surf my brains out.
That would be
Bring the
sweet.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So the second question is, what is something on your bucket list and how are you leveraging real estate investing to achieve it?
Well, the real estate investing is obviously for growing my wealth, my family's wealth, our investors' wealth, and creating those kind of that kind of financial security and prosperity. One thing that I've always dreamt of, and getting back to the water sports, my other hobby, between these two, it takes up far too much time, so I don't get to do it as often as I'd like. But I'm also a sailor, and I race on a sailboat in
That's
San
cool.
Diego. Yeah. And so I race on it's a Beneteau 45. It's a 45-foot sailboat. There's a 12-person crew, and we race inshore, offshore. We'll do these overnight big regattas with a bunch of other big boats and push it around the race course really hard. I've always wanted to own my own boat. And so that's kind of one of those, like, I know I've made it when I own my own boat kind of a deal, because it's like boats are expensive, and it's not just the purchase price, it's the ongoing maintenance and everything else. I don't own this boat that I race on, so I'm just privileged to, be able to race with a cool crew. And the guy that owns the boat everyone's a type A, right? If you're not first, you're last, right? So like, everybody wants to win. And so it's amazing when we win these races, but it sucks when we don't.
Nope, I get
So,
that.
yeah, own a cool sailboat. That's what I would say.
I like
That's
it.
cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
The third question we have for you, Rob, is what is one piece of advice you have for someone who wants to start passively investing in real estate?
Yeah, for the passive investors, one thing I would say is educate yourself on how to underwrite deals in the asset type that you're interested in investing in. We do a lot of multifamily deals. And so if multifamily is something that you're interested in investing in, spending the time to learn how to underwrite the deals is going to help passive investors immensely. And I'll tell you why. I see a lot of deals being promoted by sponsors, and I know you guys are tapped into the community. So you see deals floating around, raising money for this deal or that deal. I feel like, especially in this phase of the real estate cycle that we're in right now, there's a lot of deals being pushed out there to LPs, to passive investors that have, in my view, some serious underlying currents of risk that an everyday passive investor who's busy in their own right, maybe full-time job, business ownership, whatever it is, and you want some exposure to real estate. And so you just see this thing pop across your screen with a 25 IRR and a 10% cash on. You see the shiny numbers, but how did they get to those figures?
Yeah.
And asking those right questions about what were some of your assumptions, because not all these marketing packages promote how they got to those numbers. And the webinars don't get in the weeds about, hey, we made a assumption in year 4 that we're going to get blankety blank or whatever. So my advice for passive investors would be educate yourself on how to underwrite, and that'll teach you the right questions to ask your sponsor before investing in a deal. Because I think there's some deals that maybe have some additional risk in them that may not present itself on the surface.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice.
That's a really good advice for sure. Because you and I know, and Susie knows as well, like there are so many different levers you can pull in underwriting to make it look
Totally.
however you want to make it
Can
look.
look fancy.
Yeah.
I can make any deal look good. Like,
Yeah.
who is it? Susie, we were in Austin for that Raise Masters thing, and Sandhya had presented. And I've quoted her a few times. She said, okay, the underwriting is everything, because it's like, okay, Mr. Investor, do you want your money back in 2 years or in 5 years? I was like, I can make that happen. And
Yeah.
it's totally true. I mean, there's so much leverage in the modeling and the underwriting that, I mean, you can make bad deal look good. And to retail everyday investors who want exposure to the asset type, that are investing passively in a couple deals here and there with some sponsors, they may or may not ever know about how they got to these figures. So I would say learning to underwrite, it's just going to give you a huge advantage to vetting out your sponsors before investing.
Totally.
Absolutely.
So, fourth and final question. Dun, 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 dun. If you had unlimited resources available to you, how would you leave an impact?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I have 2 kids. Our daughter is 6 and our son is 2. And I love them to the moon and back. And I think since becoming a parent, I've become much more sensitive to issues with children. I mean, you read these articles or you see situations where kids are in bad economic situations or stressful, adverse home life, stuff like that. If resources were unlimited, I would definitely do something to help the youth. I mean, it's to the point, like my wife jokes, I don't like watching movies where there's like weird kid neglect.
Yeah.
It really bothers me now. Whereas before, I was just like, oh, that happens, whatever. But now, like having our own kids don't need to be stressed about anything. They just need to focus on being kids and enjoying their lives. And I would try to do something to help underserved, underprivileged kids have stresses in their lives that they shouldn't otherwise have.
Right? Because they give off so much just love and happiness, right? Like to steal that away is not okay.
Yeah, my kids, they just worry about what they're going to color on their coloring sheet. It's just like, and just the innocence, and they don't need to be worrying about food insecurity is like a big deal, right? And it's like I'm hungry, or even worse, just bad house environments. I hate that stuff, and so that's what I would do.
I like it.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Great answers. Yeah, absolutely. So, Rob, before we end the show, would you mind sharing with our adventurous family where they can find out more about you or get in contact with you?
Sure. Yeah, you can check out our website, has my bio, all my contact information. That's harbordriveholdings.com. You can shoot me an email. It's rob@harbordriveholdings.com. And yeah, if I could be a resource to anybody, reach out. Would love to help. And on the underwriting piece, we freely give out our underwriting model. So if anyone wants a copy of that, I'm happy to share it. Just drop me an email.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for joining us today. All of what you said will be in the show notes. And so thank you again for all the knowledge and for just giving up this time and just sharing everything, because it means a lot to us and it does mean a lot to our adventurous family. So thank you again.
It was an honor to be here, guys. Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Yay.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Until next time, explore more, adventure awaits.
Woo!